Okay, I think we're live. Hi everyone, welcome to Base 10 Montessori. I am Teresa, and today I want to do a live stream, one because I'm trying to test a different microphone, so I want to see if the sound is working well or if it's a problem. So that's one thing I want to do today. So I'll probably be checking on that throughout the stream. And then let me see. I feel like I should turn the sound down just a little bit. I'm not sure. Before I go on, I'm going to bring down, I don't want this mic to be too hot. Sometimes it gets a little hot. So, all right, so that's one thing I want to do. I want to check out the sound, see if that works, even if nobody's watching, because someday maybe somebody will watch and the sound should work. So that would be a good thing. So let's do that. Also, I kind of wanted to go back to talking about multisensory education because if you watched my video on getting my class materials, and maybe I can bring that up while I'm busy doing that, I wasn't too happy at the materials I received in the mail. So let me see if I can bring up, at least show you, I'm not going to play it, but I'm going to at least show you no, that's not what I wanted. Stop, YouTube, stop. But don't stop with the live stream. That's the other thing. So I should have had this set up to begin with, and I didn't. But the video I made evaluating my my package that I got in the mail, I wanted to go through that, and let me bring this up real quick. And see if I can share at least what the video is. Share screen. Let's do that one. There. Okay, so I have right here, this video is where I got my materials for my class, and I opened it up and I was kind of surprised at what was inside, and I wasn't too happy, and I decided that maybe this isn't the class that I want to take. So if you don't know what's inside this box, I'll share it a little bit on this stream, but also if you wanted to go back and take a look at that video so you have more context, go ahead and do that. I'm going to stop sharing that screen at the moment. So take a look at that video. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on how you felt the materials looked. I asked a few of my coworkers, and I thought, especially some of my coworkers that are Montessori trained, trying to get their perspective, because I was really disappointed in the contents of the package. And they said that it seemed like it wasn't up to standards. They got to up their game, is what some of my coworkers said. So that was one thing. But if you hadn't seen it, you know, I had Orton-Gillingham training before, and when I went through Orton-Gillingham training, I got a bunch of materials. I got a sand tray, a blending board, I got red words, I've got letter cards, I got 3 binders worth of material, I got a cassette tape to learn how to correctly pronounce letters, which is ironic because I mispronounce everything all the time, but you know, it's a good education to have. At least when you're presenting the letters, try to pronounce them correctly to the student. That's at least the goal here. And I usually work with my 3 to 6-year-olds, so I don't have to say too much to them other than the sound. So if I can get that much right, I'm doing pretty well. So anyways, in the box, now these materials are supposed to cost $450. I got these 2 plastic sleeves with paper in them. And then I got into the box a little bit more, and it was a bunch of like dollar store type materials, like little crafts and stuff like that. And I thought, what's going on with this? And so if you go back and listen to the video, I did contact the company and I asked for an explanation, and they gave me an explanation, and they were very nice about it. Didn't have any problems with getting a refund. She said she'd even refund me the full cost of sending the material back, so my refund plus $12 for shipping, because they want that stuff back. Now that I've decided not to take the class, they want those 2 Ziploc bags full of things back. So I am sending that back. And so I was a little disappointed in this, and I don't know what your perspective is on all of this. If you've had Orton-Gillingham training, if you're interested in it, if you're looking for multisensory activities, maybe this is something you were interested in and you thought I was being maybe a bit overreactive. However, I just think for the money, it wasn't what I wanted and it wasn't what I felt I needed. So I thought I don't want to be too critical just because it didn't fit my needs, but also I don't want to be critical to the point where I'm not offering you something in return. Like, why isn't this working? And what is it that I'm thinking of that might work better, right? So I want to come to a place where I'm offering something and not just criticizing something, so that you have some ideas of what might work best for your environment. And I am going to switch headphones real quick. Okay. So anyways, behind me I've got like all my stuff stacked, and I hope that I can sort through it easily enough to show you what I've got going on here. I have back here, I've got all my binders that I have there. So there's a lot of stuff here. I kind of wanted to go through with some ideas. Now I'm coming from the perspective that I'm putting this together in a Montessori way for a Montessori environment. And if that's something that you're interested in, then this will work really well for you. Depending on your training, you know, I know AMS can be a little bit different than AMI, but I think that there are enough ideas here that we can work with. If you are totally out of the Montessori loop and you're not quite sure what I'm referring to, I'm still waiting on my sandpaper letters and some of my language materials, so I'm not able to show you just yet what I'm talking about if you don't have a reference point. So that's going to be a little difficult. However, I do have some ideas that I think still might help you. So hang in there, see if this helps you out. But first I wanted to show some of the multisensory things that we've got going on here when it comes to teaching children who have disabilities. And the first thing that you want to do, particularly in the Montessori environment, is make everything bigger, which I kind of think that's probably why they gave me these really big sleeves, plastic with paper in it. I'm guessing it's because you can use a dry erase marker on this. That would be my guess. That's my first guess. So I have just a dry erase board. You can get that at, I think I got that at Dollar General, right? So that is one thing that you can use in place of that. So making everything bigger is a big way to add a multisensory element in it. And why is that? And I'll tell you why. One of the important things is for children who are dyslexic, they need to use that shoulder joint. So when they're writing and you're getting this big movement going, that shoulder joint action actually really helps their ability to learn and retain information. So that's one reason why we're going to go bigger. So when you have the small sandpaper letters in the Montessori classroom, and even though those are already multisensory, right, because they're made of sandpaper, they are quite small. And so getting to a point where you can get that bigger and get that shoulder joint in there, which is why those big chalkboards are really important, that is going to help a lot. So that's one way in the Montessori environment that you can change things up and be multisensory in a different way. So you don't really need a ton of different materials. You might just need to choose materials that are much bigger. And another thing I have, and this is something I kind of want to experiment with this summer, and I don't think that these are quite big enough for what I want to do, but I have these canvases, just a plain canvas. I think I got these at Goodwill, so they were even cheaper than what I usually buy them for. I don't think these are quite big enough, but I want to actually use chalkboard paint on them and use chalk for these. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could get these big canvases and put our sandpaper letters on a big, huge art canvas, and then the child could trace over them with chalk. So you've got the hand movement. I'm making the letter R for those of you who are wondering what I'm doing. That's the letter R in cursive. And instead of keeping it on a small sandpaper sandpaper letter like we have in the classroom, making it bigger and putting it onto something like these bigger canvases. And if, depending on if you want to write the letter for them or if you want them to be totally independent, you know, you can have one canvas that you write all letters on in chalk, and you can just pre-write it for the child and they can trace over it. Or you could have a canvas for every single letter. So getting those bigger experiences for the children are really important when it comes to learning disabilities. So when you're thinking of multisensory, we're also thinking of kinetic, right? Or this movement, which a lot of teachers, I think, now do try and look for ways to add movement into the learning system, right? But the shoulder joint is really important. And I have seen in classrooms in the language area, in Montessori classrooms, where the younger children weren't allowed to use the big chalkboards. Like, they could use a small one, but they weren't allowed to use that really big chalkboard. And I'm going to say, if that is a rule that you have in your classroom, maybe reconsider that rule. Reconsider that rule, because children who need to, or who are having a difficult time learning the sandpaper letter, really need the big experience. You could also put paper down on the floor and let them do a really big, huge work on the floor and get that shoulder joint in that way. And again, with the dry erase boards, they're a really good option too. However, here's the problem with dry erase boards. They used dry erase markers. And in the Montessori environment, we're not real big fans of markers. And the reason why is because they don't add pressure to the hand when you're writing. And so when you're trying to develop the hand for writing, you're trying to develop those muscles, the markers, they don't do a lot for hand development. And so that's why we always opt for something more like chalk or pencils. And chalk is really amazing. I don't like chalk. It is one of my sensory avoidant materials. I don't like to touch chalk. However, I have learned to push past that because I have bad handwriting. I don't have the best handwriting. I don't know why I went into teaching 3 to 6 year olds. I think there's some sort of thing that says if you teach 3 to 6 year olds, you need to have really nice handwriting. I don't have nice handwriting. I was a public school child. I didn't develop my hand. But I have noticed when I use chalk, when I work with chalk, that my handwriting gets a lot better. And the next day I'm like, oh, I'm writing a lot better than I usually do. And it's usually because I gave a chalk lesson the day before. So that is something to keep in mind, is that when you're working with chalk, your hand changes. The way you move your hand changes. The way you move when you're writing changes. And you don't really want all of this going on with a lot of writing. You don't want it to be all in here. You actually, when you're writing with chalk, you're kind of moving your arm, right? There's not as much wrist movement. And that's really something to keep in mind, is getting that flow of how to write. And what does this have to do with multisensory? Well, again, it's in that movement, right? It's in the movement of what we're doing. It's in the movement of the shoulder joint, which is really important. So there's something to keep in mind. Those are easy adaptations that we do a lot of in the Montessori environment, but sometimes we don't go big enough. Sometimes we don't think big enough, or sometimes we're just not as flexible as we could be when it comes to adapting those ideas within the classroom. So those are really easy ways to make some sort of adaptation to your language area for children who are having difficulty learning that sound-symbol relationship. And then also something else to keep in mind is when they are doing the sandpaper letters, make it more movement based as far as what they're doing. So sometimes I'll have them get out the entire alphabet, or at least the letters that they're working on, and I'll have them line them up like in the hallway, and I'll get like a piece of paper out, and it's this huge piece of paper, and you can pre-write the letters, or you can have an older child write the letters in order, like the A, B, C, D, E order all the way down. And the child can work on matching them, and they're standing up and they're lining them up and they're moving all the way down the hallway. And it's this big physical work. So that is another way you can make this a movement-oriented work. And when you put it into movement, that is multisensory. And that is usually something that a child with dyslexia, a child who's having trouble reading, really needs that movement, as well as children with hyperactivity and ADHD. So just remember that movement, add movement. Anytime you can add movement, that is going to be one way that you can help a child learn something. So there you go for that part. And then I was going to do a demonstration of this, but maybe I'll make a separate video because I don't really have the camera set up to show you. I do also what's called rainbow letters. And that has to do with, I usually get either a chalkboard, but sometimes I also just get black paper. And when the child is writing their letters and they're really working on writing it, but they're really resistant to it, and especially in the Montessori environment, we get children in who do not want to use cursive. And we use cursive in AMI. And sometimes they're really afraid of that, especially if they're a little bit older and they really have started in print and they don't want to make that change. And we really want to encourage the cursive. One reason is because cursive is beneficial for people with dyslexia. And one of the reasons why is that our point of origin for all the letters starts in the same spot. Whereas in print, we're starting in all different places. But in cursive, we always start on that bottom left-hand side, and it's a flowing motion, which really helps somebody who struggles with dyslexia. So that's one reason why we encourage it. But the rainbow letters can work with both cursive and print, and children who are really reluctant to practice with chalk, which is really something that helps them if they're struggling with some sort of a learning disability. Writing the letters really helps. And those rainbow letters, sometimes, a lot of the time, I'll either do rainbow letters or rainbow words, and I'll introduce 3 letters at a time usually. And when I go and I tell them, let's practice our letters, if they're having a resistance to it, I get out multicolored chalk. And I say, okay, I'm going to pick, and usually I pick the white chalk because it's the most boring, right? They work with the white chalk all the time. And so I write, let's say, the letter T. So I'm writing the letter T with the white chalk, and then I say, okay, now we're going to take the green chalk. And we're going to go over it. And now we're going to take the pink chalk and go over it. And we're going to go over it with the blue chalk. And we're going to keep going over it. And the child can go over it as many times as they want. And after a while, they're going to see this layer of rainbow letters. You can do this with learning words. This works really well with red words as well. So just making it more fun. I think sometimes I've been in a lot of classrooms where it's just white chalk. That's all you have. The children only work with white chalk. And the chalk doesn't really come out for anything else, right? It doesn't really get used for anything else except for maybe some art activities. And my question to you as a Montessori teacher would be, why not? Why not allow the children to use chalk? This is an easy adaptation. We're not adding anything different to the classroom. We're not adding anything besides extra colors of chalk. And if that is a multi-sensory way to help the child adapt, if it's something that makes the environment more attractive to the child and they have less resistance, then I would say, yes, let's do this. This is a great idea because it doesn't really take a lot of extra materials or extra effort on our part to provide it. As long as we are providing it in a very purposeful way that doesn't get really silly, set your boundaries, know what your boundaries are so that it doesn't go overboard. And I usually offer a place for them to draw with chalk as well because children want to draw on the chalkboard. And I try to remind them that the writing chalkboard is for writing, and then also offer an area in the room where they can do art with chalk, and so that they have these 2 different places. And we are very strict about that in Montessori. The writing chalkboard is for writing, and then we need to also allow that outlet for creativity with chalk in a different place, right? So make sure if you're seeing something happening in your room and it's not with the material and it's not in the area that you want it to be, see if you can work it into a different area of the room with a different work. So try to set those boundaries, but also find out how to allow an appropriate behavior with what they're doing. So that's something else to keep in mind as far as using that multi-sensory idea. And the reason why it's multi-sensory there is because we're using different colors, right? That makes it more visually appealing, more visually interesting. Children love color. So that's something that they can do. And sometimes when they're done doing it, when they're done tracing it, what I show them is that then they can smudge all the colors together. And then that allows them to take their hand to it and smudge it with their fingers. Some kids really hate that. Some kids really like that. So that is something else to keep in mind. So there's another idea, and it didn't cost you $450 to find that out. It hopefully just costs you a few minutes of time watching this YouTube video. Another thing, when it comes to doing something like a red word activity, and this is my pouch of red words I got from my first dyslexia training, my Orton-Gillingham training. So I have a bunch of red words in here, and I'm trying to pull one out that has, and I don't know if I have one right in the beginning of this. I should have found this before I went live, right? Preparation is really important. I'm not seeing one at the moment. Oh yeah, here it is. I found one. So I have a whole big pouch of red words. Probably can't tell, but if you look really close, there are little dots, and that is puff paint. So when I do a red word, you can make it multisensory by adding little dots of puff paint to it. Now, not all my words have puff paint in it, and that's not because I don't like it, it's just because it's very time consuming. So something to keep in mind, right? But if you are in the primary environment and you have your list of red words you want the child to learn, or even just their letters, right? This is just a different way to do letters. Add dots of puff paint, that adds texture. Anytime you write a letter or a red word and you can add texture to it, that's multisensory. So just think about this when you're introducing something. This can also be something that you do as a separate section in your classroom from the sandpaper letters. So let's say you're introducing the sandpaper letters, you're doing it in the normal way, and the child is not retaining the information. Something you can do that might be familiar to you is take your collage area. If you have a collage area of all these multisensory tools, remember those Ziploc bags full of dollar store materials? They had the puff balls that they sent me and all that stuff. You can even use glitter, but I don't like glitter. Some people like it. I don't like glitter, but I'd be willing to use it if it really helped a child, but it's going to be a last resort type of material. But any of those things, think of any of those things they can use in the collage area. Why not have an entire area that's letter collage? That is, okay, so let's take one of those sandpaper letters, let's put it on a big piece of paper, and let's write it on a big piece of paper. And then you can glue whatever you want to it, right? You can glue any of those things to it you want, anything from that collage, and make it very multisensory, make it sensorial, give it a lot of texture. So that is something that you can add to your language area. Maybe you want to put it in the practical life area. I'm not sure what best suits your needs about whether or not you put it in language or practical life, but maybe create a separate letter art area. And every time that you introduce a letter, the child has the option to take that sandpaper letter over to a letter art area where they can just do something multisensory with that. And it's on the shelf. It's not something that they have to depend on an adult for, unless you want to, if you want to pre-trace them, that might be one thing. But if you just want to even have older children help make really big letters for the younger children, that's another way to add that multisensory component to your Montessori classroom without it being this big, spectacular, out of order, chaos, glitter everywhere experience. We're going to limit it. Maybe we don't do it in place of the sandpaper letters, keep doing the sandpaper letters, and then offer another type of letter activity somewhere else in the classroom that might benefit the child, right? So we still want to keep this multisensory thing going, but we also want to offer it in a very controlled fashion, right? In a very orderly fashion. So another idea you can think of to make your language area more multisensory. Now, in my other video, I talked about my sand tray. And I have my sand tray back here, but I don't think I'm going to pull it out at the moment because it's kind of buried underneath of things. And I mentioned in my video where I was opening my box of materials and getting really frustrated, I had mentioned in there that a lot of my students didn't like the sand. And I also mentioned I've seen the sand tray get out of control when you put it in a classroom, and it goes from being purposeful for a couple children to not being purposeful at all. It becomes a distraction, right? And for children who do need that, though, for children who need something like the sand tray, and the sand tray, the actual sand is not working for you because some children don't like it. One thing you can do is you can offer them to write with like the eraser of a pencil or something like that, but then they're not really getting the sensory experience, right? They're not really touching it. So think about the things you could change it out with. And one of the things that my students liked when I changed the sand tray to something else was lentils, dried lentils, beans. I actually had some that were like this hot pink color of just dried beans, and I put that in the tray. So dried lentils, for some reason, get a bag of dried peas, get dried white beans and dye them pink or blue or whatever color you want to do. Whatever, if there's a color, like I worked with a child with autism, obsessed with the color yellow. If you gave him the color yellow, that's all he wanted. That's everything he wanted was in the color yellow. And that was his color. And so if you have a situation where a child is really attracted to a certain color, work with that, and it does not have to be, it doesn't have to be sand. It doesn't have to be anything other than what works for that child, right? So keep trying different things in your sand tray. Some people use candy sprinkles, not my favorite choice, but if you want to go down that road, go for it. I think the dried lentils might actually be a better choice than that, but you know what? You can even do things like shaving cream in your tray. And this is where it gets tricky when it comes to control, right? How does this not get out of control? And that's one big thing I've seen when I take my special education classes, and I'm looking at all these classes that say, oh, do all these multisensory things. And I thought, well, how does this not turn into a huge distraction? How does this not turn into a huge mess? I'm all right with mess as long as it's purposeful. But when it gets to being just silliness, that's when you have to stop it, right? You have to draw that line. And so what I would say, if you're going to introduce something like shaving cream onto your sand tray and you're doing it in a Montessori environment, or you want to do it something more like the Montessori way, I would make sure and build up to that. And I would make sure that the child really knows how to have those table scrubbing lessons. They know how to do washing dishes. And so that way, when you get to the tray, you show the child how to spray the shaving cream on, show them how to spread it out, make sure you have your setup of your sponge and your rag, and make sure also if you're going to write letters in red words, you're probably going to need one of those little metal picture frame stands standing up, and with the sand tray, not the sand tray, the sandpaper letter or some sort of letter in front of them that they can copy. So have that set up before they get their hands full of shaving cream, and have them trace into the shaving cream, and they can do that as much as they want, right? But when they're done with it, they have to be the ones responsible for it. And so that's the difference between childcare and possibly public school and Montessori. The difference is that the child takes care of their environment. They take care of their materials. And so for you to do a shaving cream material in your classroom, you have to build up to it, and they have to know how to take care of it. If they don't take care of it, I would say it's not an option. If you don't have a group of children that can take care of that work, then I wouldn't offer it, because that always comes back on the adult, and that leaves them dependent on the adult. And we're really trying to work towards independence. So when you're thinking of these multisensory activities for children, think about how can they be responsible when they're done with this activity, because you just don't want to give them free rein to have every single multi-sensory experience and then you clean up everything after them. That's not what we're about here. That's not the goal. The goal is, I want you to have this multisensory activity because I know it helps you learn, but you also have to learn the discipline, the development of the will. You have to learn how to take care of yourself, and those skills are just as important as the academic skills, aren't they? We don't want just the child to learn his letters and say, great, you learned your letters, and never take care of themselves, never take care of the environment, never take care of those around them, right? That is only 50% of what education is. The other 50% is, how do I apply these skills? In what context do I apply these skills? In what environment do I apply these skills? And what is my role in the community when I'm doing this? So that is another thing to keep in mind with the multisensory activities. And I'm just looking around to see if I have anything else. That might be all I have for today as far as the multisensory thing goes, but I really wanted to touch base with this whole idea that I was going to pay almost $2,000 for a class, and I got a lot of craft stuff in the mail that I was really unimpressed by. And I don't want to just come out and be negative, right? Because there is some value in that. And I think Montessori needs to work harder on thinking outside of the box when it comes to being multisensory for children with disabilities. Now, Montessori is a sensorial education. We educate the senses. This is really important to our foundation. However, if it's not in our album, we have a hard time thinking outside the box. And my goal would be, okay, let's still be Montessori. Let's still see the purpose in everything. Let's still see the order in everything. And also say, okay, let's add to some of our ideas. Let's see what educational research is saying. Let's see what modern science is saying, and see if we can incorporate that into the structure that we already have. Because we don't want to take away from the Montessori structure. We don't want to take away from that Montessori foundation. We want to add to it. But learning to add to it is a really difficult thing. And I think for people who don't have a background in education outside of Montessori, sometimes it's kind of scary leaving those albums. And there's a lot of people asking, well, how far away from my albums do I stray? And this is something I really struggle with. My background was early childhood education, and I worked in childcare. And I did not like working in childcare. I do not want to go back to working in childcare. That is not something I'm interested in. It wasn't an environment that I ever felt fulfilled in. And so when I went to Montessori training, I deeply, deeply loved my albums. I loved the method. I loved everything I did. And then as I got back into the classroom and I started doing a lot of my stuff, and some of the stuff just didn't land. Some of my lessons didn't land. There were things going on with certain children that I had to figure out. And I thought, okay, what do I do? My lessons aren't working. And there's an argument on one side to say, well, Montessori is perfect the way it is. You just have to keep going back to your album, and then Montessori will just fix everything the way it is. And then I've heard other people say, well, we have to adapt. We have to change our lessons for children who aren't learning. And the more I learn about not setting aside my albums, not deviating from my albums, but adapting and understanding maybe what's new in the world of educational research, helps me understand the importance, first of all, of the training I already have, but second of all, how do I build on that? So fitting those two things together, instead of being afraid of adapting some of the things that I'm doing in the environment for the new philosophies that are coming out, is really important. So I hope that makes sense. There is this war going on in the Montessori world of, is Montessori perfect the way it is for all children without adaptation, or do we need to change some things? And I have gotten to the point where I feel like well, we do need to change some things. We need to adapt, and not every school system is going to look the same. And I think that's the wonderful thing about some of the private schools that are out there, is because some of them are really, really, really specific for very specific needs. Like you have the Elizabeth School out in Utah that was started by a mother whose daughter couldn't go to a Montessori school, because they couldn't serve the needs of a child with Down syndrome. And so she started a school for her daughter that met those needs, that met the needs of those of specific and different disabilities, right? So there's that. There's also Montessori schools that exist in strictly deaf communities. So that's a different way that it's very, very specific. And so when we look at Montessori, we do need to say, okay, everything here has taught me how to be scientific in the method. Everything here has taught me how to be purposeful in what I put on the shelf. And as long as I keep that on my foundation, I can go ahead and build on that and adapt. And that's one thing that I'm a little afraid of in this class, is that what I'm looking for is really, what does the research say? What is the new theory that's coming out? Because I'm not so worried yet about making lesson plans. I want to know what science has to say, and then I'll worry about the lesson plans after I understand the theory, after I understand the science. Because I won't know if my lesson plans are purposeful until I know what the science says, right? It's like putting the cart before the horse. Okay, you can have all these activities and they're going to be hit or miss depending on the child. What we really need to do is learn about theory. We need to learn about what's going on, what's new in neuroscience in children with dyslexia. Their brains are different. Some of that neuroscience coming out is really interesting, and what area of the brain that they're using and what's affecting that is very interesting. And so I really want to learn more about that scientific aspect, is what I'm interested in. And then based on what that science says, then I want to go back to my lesson plans and say, okay, here's where I'm going to incorporate that. So that's what I'm looking for out of my next Orton-Gillingham class or a refresher class. That's what I'm hoping to get out of it. Not so much the one and done type of lessons that may or not work, the hit or miss lessons. I feel like I have enough ideas there. I really want to go back to what's going on in science. So anyways, I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, leave them down below. I'll be happy to respond to them. And then also, let me see, I also have this email. If you want to contact me, if you don't want to leave a comment, but you do want to contact me, you can go over there and email me at base10montessori@gmail.com. Also, I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Facebook, but I am on Locals. So if you're interested in following me more on a different platform, I am available on Locals. And Locals is the place where if I have a PDF or if I have something that I just want to say and I want to type it out instead of make a video, it's going to be over on Locals. So if you want to support me there, that is a wonderful community. My community is free. I know some of the communities you have to pay for. Mine is not something, at least for the time being, that you have to pay for. You just have to sign up and subscribe to my Locals community. So that's something you can do there if you want to get some more resources. And I'm also on Rumble. So if you're looking for an alternative to YouTube, I'm also on Rumble. So with that being said, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, comment below if you have a question, and hopefully subscribe to the channel. I'm almost at 100 subscribers. So if you like what I'm doing here, subscribe. And I do plan to do a live stream celebration for my 100th subscriber. And it's just going to be a fun live stream. It's not going to be a lot of educational content. I'm just going to go and show you some pictures and videos from when I went to training out in San Diego. So just something fun and light, and hopefully we'll see if one of my friends is available, one of my classmates is available to join me, because we can reminisce and talk about all the silly things that happen during training. So also, if you have a question about what it's like to go through Montessori training, leave a comment down below on that too, and I'd be happy to answer it. So anyways, that's all I have for today, and I will see you either in the next video or the next live stream.